To quote Sun Tzu, "The opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself." All through the ages, generals and leaders have attempted to get the upper hand over their opposite number through planning and strategy. Here are a few examples of brilliant uses of that. In one or two cases, the plan worked for one army and not so well for the next person that tried it. Just shows the element of surprise can really pay off. So in this video, we're going to look at some of the best examples of when the plan comes together. These are not all of them, nor may they be the best examples, but I feel they're examples that will show best how it can work and how sometimes it doesn't. This is going to be part one of a two-part series. In the next video we will look at ideas that didn't work or just plain failed. So, illness manuals. During World War II, the British Army dropped manuals into enemy lines, which contained instructions on how a soldier could fake illness to get himself off active duty, or a worker to get out of the munitions factory. These deceptive manuals were disguised as sports manuals and had step-by-step instructions on how to fake a wide range of illnesses and ailments, from simple throat infections to life-threatening diseases such as tuberculosis. Once the Nazi leadership caught wind of this, they stopped sending their troops home who claimed to have said illnesses. Not only did this get healthy enemy troops returned home, it eventually ended with genuinely ill troops being sent back into combat and spreading real disease amongst their ranks. So it ended up being a bit of a win-win for the British. Scipio Africanus's tactics. So Scipio Africanus was used a great tactic against the Carthaginians at the Battle of Ilpa. Both the Romans and the Carthaginians had armies composed of their well-trained, homegrown soldiers and not so reliable Iberian allies, roughly half to half. Scipio always put his legionnaires in the centre and positioned his Iberians on the wings. Carthaginians thought this made sense and did the same with their army. They had the same routine for a couple of days where they'd form up, go out into the field, threaten the other one to attack, and then when nothing happened they'd go back to their camp. One morning, just before battle, Scipio revised this formation and put the weaker Iberians at the centre and the legionnaires on the wings. He then signalled for the attack. The surprised Carthaginians ran out of their camp and automatically made the same formation as they'd done for the last few days, assuming that Scipio was up to his usual tactics. By the time anybody had spotted the change in tactics, it was too late, and the legionnaires tore through the weaker Carthaginian wings and turned on the enemy centre before the Roman centre had even reached its counterpart. The Carthaginians were all routing and surrounded before their generals could do anything to save the day. Scipio Africanus went on to be the only general to defeat Hannibal in a land battle. And this is a bit of a risky tactic, mainly only works depending on your land, so it's flooding the land. So the Netherlands have done this for centuries and up until World War II. So they flood the land and deny their enemy the chance to move forward easily. It would call it all boggy and marshy, tanks would get stuck, horses would get stuck, it'd be a right pain. Now China tried this in the late 30s when Japan started invading them. Unfortunately, all they managed to do was kill an estimated 800,000 Chinese people, and the Japanese weren't really affected because the land was wrong. They could just go around the floods rather than having to trek through them. The Japanese did have their own brilliant idea. It was Project Fugo. So, during World War II, Japan launched more than 6,000 paper balloons attached to incendiary bombs, in the hopes that they would float across the Pacific airstream and catch American forests on fire. Quite a few made it to America. They actually found one in Canada in 2014 that thankfully hadn't gone off. But they didn't really do a lot of damage. This information was kept very secret by the US government, so very few people knew about it, except a few hundred people in the Pacific Northwest who spotted the mysterious jellyfish in the sky, as they became to be known, slowly floating by. Now, one of them did land in Oregon and unfortunately killed 6 people. These were the only people to die in World War II inside the United States mainland. Empty City. Zhu Lang was a military and political genius by historical accounts, and by fictional accounts he was a magician as well. He once had to defend a town against 150,000 troops with just 100 of his own men. He told his men to hide, threw open the gates and sat on the wall playing the lute. The opposing general, certain it was a trap, ordered a retreat. He managed to win that battle without a single loss of life. Caesar's tactics. Julius Caesar's victory at Alesia was actually quite a crazy plan. So the Gauls had been doing relatively well so far in the war they were fighting with the Romans, and they played to their strengths. But they were finally cornered in a little fortified hilltop town called Alesia. Caesar knew they would run out of supplies pretty quickly, so instead of attacking the town, he laid siege to it by building a wooden wall complete with towers and ditches and traps around the entire town, about 18 kilometres in total. The Gauls, knowing they would lose if they didn't get help, managed to send messengers out to their allies. Soon enough, a Gaulish army outnumbering the Romans was marching on Alesia. Now it was Caesar's turn to lose. But, instead of giving up on the siege, Caesar ordered another wall to be built round the entire first wall. So he now had the Gauls surrounded in Alesia, and himself was surrounded by more Gauls. Looks like a lose-lose. But what followed was a couple of days of intense fighting, with the Gauls almost managing to break through the wall in several places. Mark Antony, who would later on go on to have a relationship with Cleopatra, led a charge to save one section, and Caesar himself took command of the last reserves. He personally threw himself into the melee and turned the tide of the battle. Apparently, he grabbed his own fleeing troops and turned them around back into combat, and his personal bravery inspired his legions to endure. Eventually, the Gaulish reinforcements routed and fled the field, and the other Gauls, out of supplies and still surrounded, surrendered. That tactic's pretty crazy, and it's a surprise that it actually worked. Gurkhas. So, in the recent conflict with the Taliban in Afghanistan, there was a tactic the Gurkhas liked to use. That's quite a gruesome tactic, but considering how violent that war ended up being, it's not too bad, I guess. So what the Gurkhas would do is, if they had to attack an outpost, they'd sneak up much earlier than they planned to do the attack, and they'd kill and cut off the guards' heads and then reattach them with spikes. So when the guard change happened, the new guards would tap their mate on the shoulder to swap over, and their head would fall off, so they'd crap themselves and run off. Genuinely after that they didn't really put up a fight, but the Gurkhas could effectively just walk in, so it saved them a lot of lives. Although this was a good tactic, the Gurkhas were also known for their phenomenal one-man army skills. In one recorded incident, a Gurkha named Dip Prasad Pun defended his outpost alone against up to 30 Taliban. He used 400 rounds, 17 grenades and a claymore. When he was out of ammo, he bludgeoned the last attacking Taliban with the tripod of his MG. He managed to save 3 of his friends and colleagues. Cats. Not the musical. In the Battle of Pelusium, Persian leader Cambyses II used cats to defeat an Egyptian army. He had his soldiers paint cats on their shield and brought hundreds of cats and other animals that the Egyptians held sacred to the front lines. The Egyptians regarded certain animals, especially cats, as being sacred and would not injure them on any account, and they refused to fight the cat army and were easily defeated because of it. Inflatable tanks and armies. Now, personally, I've always liked the idea of inflatable tanks and armies. They're brilliant and so stupid at the same time. They really shouldn't work. So the best use of this inflatable army has to be by the Allies during their preparation for the D-Day landings at Normandy. Now, the most logical point for an attack on France was Calais, as it was closest to the UK mainland. However, the Germans knew this, and they focused most of their defence at this point. So to convince the Germans that the Allies were going to attack, they built a massive base there, but it was pretty much all fake. And a few of the tactics they used to throw the Germans off were as follows. So they used a bunch of inflatable tanks and aeroplanes, as well as wooden ones as well. They are all painted to look like boats, tanks, airplanes from the air. So when a reconnaissance flight flew over, it looked like the Allies were amassing a massive fleet in Dover ready to attack. They used some Hollywood set designers to build an elaborate looking military base that again was totally fake. There are other smaller pieces of details leaked, like disciplinary notices for imaginary soldiers. The best example of this was when they took the body of a soldier, dressed him up in a high-ranking officer, and filled his pockets full of fake orders. They even included a fake love letter from a fake girlfriend, pictures from a fake family, and then floated him out towards the Germans, hoping they would find him and think they got lucky. The idea worked, and the Germans had no idea until the Allies attacked Normandy on D-Day. So the last one's a bit weird and rather cruel. It's flaming pigs. So Hannibal, who we've already mentioned once already, was a fantastic strategist. He used elephants to get himself across the Alps to the Romans, which meant the Romans had no time to rest and train new troops. So the Romans had to come up with a great plan to keep him at bay till they could get more troops in. So their idea was to light pigs on fire and send them towards the enemy to scare the elephants and slow them down. Then another use for flaming pigs was in sieges. So what they'd do is they'd dig a tunnel under the castle. They then herd a load of pigs set on fire into the tunnel. They'd set fire to the supports and bring the tunnel down, collapsing it and bringing the castle down with it. Now King John of England, the one of Magna Carta of Robin Hood fame, used this at the siege of Rochester Castle. So, as I said at the beginning, this isn't a definitive list. I can already think of at least 3 or 4 other examples of things that were done that were fantastic, but that could be for a future video. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, as always, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe and share it with your mates. I hope you're all having a good day, or have had a good day, and as always, stay safe. And I'll see you in part 2 shortly. Goodbye.